Thanks, Arvind, for that wonderful introduction. Usually after Arvind does an introduction, I can straight away go to the Q&A. So if you got any questions, let me know. If you got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we can pack up and go to the wine section. But thanks. I mean, he took a lot of load off me. I understand that ladies are concerned that he's not left anything much for me to say. All of you, yes, but you must understand that I've not spoken to anybody for 236 days, and I get so many invitations that by the end of 1 month or then I've resolved that I need to find a boat again. I need to con a sponsor and get going again. It's not easy to talk because we've been silent. You can't make up stories because you don't talk, right? But anyway, this is a literary festival, Mysuru Lit Fest. And I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about books here, discussed books. You're quite convinced that books are essential for society. It's important that we read books. It's important that we write books. But I beg to differ. Books have caused a lot of problems for me. I used to be a voracious reader. I used to read just about everything that I could find. My usual routine used to be Saturday, hit the library of the Naval Officers Institute, pick up 6 books, and every day read 1 book in the afternoon, go play, and at the end of the week, carry all those 6 books, return it, and come back with another 6 books. The problem was these libraries were stocked with books about sailing adventures. So there is, some guy's lost at sea, some guy's run away from home, and he's found a boat or a ship, and he's, become a stowaway, and he has his adventure. And in 7th standard, I go and tell my mother, I'm going to run away from home, and I'm going to find my adventure. My mother said, not now. Thankfully, I listened to the women in my life, because of which at least something got sorted. She said, not now, you grow up and join the Navy, and you do what you want to do. So, growing up, I was a nerd. I was a very serious student. I was known to be extremely impractical with no practical skills at all. In fact, some of my relatives used to challenge. I used to stay in Cochin. I lived in Cochin in Bombay. Some of my relatives used to say, I'll give you 20 rupees, get on this bus, get off at so-and-so, stop, go out, buy a juice, drink it, come back to the spot after getting on another bus. And I just couldn't do it. I was so impractical. Any Malayalis here? Okay, so I don't know the equivalent in Kannada, but Karagathilla, that's what they say. Even over Karagathilla. He's useless. I used to read a lot. I read Chekhov and Tolstoy in 10th standard. I read Nehru because I thought it would help in history. I read Arnold Toynbee in 10th standard, his study of history. And I scored the worst marks in 10th standard in social sciences. Books, I'm not good. Don't read books. You guys take it seriously. Just stay on social media, don't read books, okay? So yes, 12th standard I cleared engineering medicine because my parents pushed me into it, and anyway, I liked studying, so I wrote the exams, but I was very keen that I joined the Navy because I wanted to have an adventure. I wanted to be a pilot, I wanted to be a sailor, and the only place where this was possible was the Navy, so, Navy it was for me. My dad said, if you want to join government service, finish your engineering and then, become an IAS officer. I said, they don't get to fly or sail, so no chance. Mother said, become a doctor. That's what all mothers say. They're not engineering inclined. But when I decided to join the Navy, my parents supported that decision, joined Naval Academy. And in the 3rd year of Naval Academy, I was part of the Naval Academy's sailing team. In the 3rd year, one gentleman from Goa gifted a magazine on sailing. And it had the news of a race. It was called Around Alone. A woman sailor called Isabel Orticia was leading the race. She was like way ahead of every man in each leg. And that inspired me to someday go around the world alone. So when I became when I started earning my salary at that time, it was 8,500 rupees. I did some calculations and I thought, if you need 1 crore to buy a boat, in those days, I'm talking about 99, if you need 1 crore to buy a boat, if I keep aside 8,000 rupees every month, in my provident fund for the first 10 years and double it to 20,000 for the next 10 years, by the time I retire, I'll have enough money to buy a boat. I was surviving on 500 rupees a month. That's the extent to which I went to, make sure that I could live my dream someday. And then this question popped up. Sure, I'll get a boat, but what about the charts? I decided a plan to steal a chart from every ship I served. Well, thankfully, 10 years later, the Navy started a program to send one man around the world alone in a sailboat, and his name was Captain Dilip Donde. This project was kickstarted by Admiral Manohar Avati, who too was inspired by a book. He was a young officer in England, being trained. He went on a stroll in the evening, and he saw this bookstore where there was this book written by Joshua Slocum on how he sailed around the world in 3 years in the late 1800s. He was inspired. He came back and he said, I will make sure that an Indian goes around the world. And as a result of that, many, many years later, it took him many years to convince the Navy to give funds for this. The Navy accepted his project, his idea, and we have Captain Dilip Donde sailing around the world. He needed a shore support, a person who could clean the boat, keep the logistics intact, make sure that things are loaded onto the boat, and act as an assistant. And the Navy took me in. This is 10 years after I dreamed that I want to do a circumnavigation. Well, so Captain Donde sails around the world. I become his shore support, and I'm flying to various places around the world to, help him. And by the end of it, when he stops at South Africa on his last leg, Navy is now sure that he will complete it. They decide to go one step higher, and they want somebody to do a non-stop circumnavigation. And I get a call from Admiral Avati. He asks, do you want to? And I say yes. And he's like, I've not even asked you what. I was like, yes is the answer. We'll figure out the question later. I said yes. And he's like, okay, I want you to do a non-stop circumnavigation. I said, yes. I know you're going to ask me. I've been, preparing an answer for this for the last 10 years. Imagine, 10 years I've been dreaming to do this, of doing this project, and the Navy is going to place $1 million boat at my disposal and paying me to go around the world non-stop, all by myself. It's like fantastic. But the thing is, I was also conned by some books that I read. Montessier, Long Way, A World of My Own, Sir Robin Knox Johnston. Write these names down and have a look at it later. So I end up doing a single-handed non-stop circumnavigation of the Earth. That sounds quite simple. It is quite simple. You can do it in 3 steps. First, you get the money. Second, you get the boat. And third, you sail around the world. It's quite simple. It's only 40,000 kilometers. Only 40,000 kilometers, which is the length of the equator, the circumference of the Earth. You have to start and finish in the same port. You start from, let's say, Bombay, where I started from. You have to finish at Bombay. You cannot stop anywhere else. You cannot take anybody's help. So if you run out of ballpoint pens and you borrow a ballpoint pen, you're disqualified. You run out of water, you ask for a barrel of water or a jerry can of water, you're disqualified. It has to be unassisted. That's what this word means. And you have to be alone. You have to do it continuously. You have to sail south of the 3 Great Capes, Cape Leuven in southwestern Australia, Cape Horn in South America, which is known as the Everest of the oceans, and Cape of Good Hope in South Africa, which is called the Graveyard of Ships. You have to sail south of all these capes and come back to the point where you had started from. I started my voyage on the 1st of November 2012. Took 151 days to finish my circumnavigation, and I had a lot of interesting problems along the way. I ran out of water. I was okay. Just one request: if you clap, that doesn't mean that I'm going to stop. If you stand up and clap, I will still not stop. I have been without a mic for 236 days. So I did have my share of problems. I ran out of water, my sails tore, and I had my fair share of storms. You go to the Southern Ocean, you get 2 storms every week, compared to, let's say, 1 cyclone every year in the Bay of Bengal. It's quite bad, and that is why the number of people who have successfully completed this, and I'm talking about 2012-13, was less than 100. And at that time, almost 6,000 people had climbed the Everest, almost 600 people had gone to space. But single-handed non-stop circumnavigation remains one of the toughest and extremely rare adventures known to mankind. Did you guys contribute? Yes. You paid your taxes. You paid your taxes. The Navy put that money into the boat. and help me sail around the world. So when I finish my circumnavigation, spend 5 months all by myself, and I come in, there's a muted reception. I was told to go into hiding. One of the admirals who received me shakes hand and says, "Congratulations, you've created history out of geography today." It's quite true, quite true. So it was a muted reception, and then I was shunted into a room in the mess, and I was told to stay there hidden for, I don't know, 6 days. And then on the 6th of April, early in the morning, I'm escorted back into my boat. I'm told to just get out of Bombay Harbour and come back at 3 o'clock. And as I come back at 3 p.m. into Bombay Harbour, the gateway of India, not India Gate, as I come back into the gateway of India, as I sail in, I see 3 helicopters flying past. One of them had the President of India. And then I put my boat alongside and I start climbing up the steps. The President himself has come down to give a reception. Now, like Arvind mentioned just now, I didn't realize the importance of that event then. But later I came to know that all presidential receptions are held in Rashtrapati Bhavan. He never goes out of Rashtrapati Bhavan to receive anybody, and this is probably the only time that it has happened. And thanks to the reception by the Honorable President, this became big news. Otherwise, nobody really bothered about some lone guy who's sailing around the world. Probably some musician decided to, play some music to him so that he could cure him of any mental illnesses. But yeah, because of the Honorable President receiving me, it was front page news everywhere, full, sports page coverage and stuff like that. And then people woke up to the idea of this non-stop circumnavigation. They started reading up further. They started asking me questions. And the most important question, or most frequently asked question was, "Did you do the solo alone?" Seriously, I'm not kidding. In fact, one of the taxi drivers who was taking me from the railway station to IIM Calicut asked me this question: "You were alone in the solo, right?" I think probably there were bureaucrats who thought that there must have at least been a peon with him. Then there were naval officers who thought that there were ships next to me, giving me all sorts of help along the way. But fact is, I was alone. I was absolutely alone. And I had a lot of experience in that, 151 days that I was at sea. I want to talk about it, but there's a problem. I don't have words to describe what I've been through. Going back to my favorite author, Gabriel Marquez, who in his Nobel acceptance speech said, "My crucial problem is a lack of conventional means to render my life believable." And I believe that is the crux of my solitude. So, I take a lot of books with me in the circumnavigation. That included Nicholas Taleb, 100 Years of Solitude, which is one of my favorite books, and I read it every year religiously. And these are just a few names that I'm taking. I come back, I write a book. The Honorable President himself gives the foreword for this book. Now, there's a Malayalam book which has done fairly well. And I wrote another book in English, which thankfully has not done too well. It is a book for young adults, so thankfully nobody is going to be inspired by a book and nobody is going to decide to sail around the world from India. At least they won't blame me for it. So when I'm back, the first and most horrible thing that people ask me to do is to give a speech, and that too in front of the President of India. I thought that it's a fantastic opportunity to thank all the people who helped me, and I started in the order in which they would be forgotten. I first thanked leading seaman Mohammed Izhar Alam, who used to be my man Friday. He used to keep the boat clean, he used to do all work when I was not around, and I started with him and I thanked everybody. And in the end, when I had to conclude my speech, I didn't know what to say, so I just turned to the Honorable President and I asked him, "Sir, can I go for one more round, please?" He thought that I was out of my mind. He laughed. To be honest, he really laughed hard, just like you guys, because for some people, even wild horses, this is what Chichester said, wild horses cannot drag me to the sinister southern ocean where the height of waves is not measured in inches and feet, but in increments of fear. That's what he said. Well, I was looking to go back to the sea alone, and there's a big reason. Imagine a life where you are not giving orders or taking orders, not putting signatures. You're your own boss, you decide what to wear and what not to wear. You have complete freedom, and I loved it. I started looking for an opportunity, and that's when the Golden Globe race of 2018 was announced. Now, the Golden Globe race of 2018 has a history that starts in 1966 when Francis Chichester sails around the world single-handed with just one stop, and when he comes back to England, he's given a fantastic reception. There are hundreds and thousands of people waiting to receive him. Within days, he's knighted by the Queen of England using the sword of Sir Francis Drake, who had sailed around the world 500 years before him. They have a long tradition of doing such mad things. Chichester's story is, it grips the sailing world. And now the only thing that remains is to do a single-handed, non-stop circumnavigation of the earth. And men are already preparing to do this around the world. The Sunday Times newspaper sees an opportunity and they declare a race. They call it the Sunday Times Golden Globe race. Anybody who wants to do this is automatically entered in this race. You don't have to pay a fee and say that I'm officially entering. Anybody who's starting from a port north of 40 degrees north and who is planning to start between 1st of July and 30th of October 1968 is automatically an entrant in this race. 9 men started the race. 9 men started this race, and out of those 9 people, only 1 finished. They say that a terrible fate awaits anyone who tries to do the Golden Globe race or who attempts this for fame and money. One of the entrants was Donald Crowhurst. He thought he will not actually go around the world, but stay in the North and South Atlantic, send fake position reports as if he is sailing around the world. You know those fake WhatsApp forwards we receive? Yeah, something similar. So he thinks that he will just fake his voyage and come up and finish, and then he'll become a rich man giving talks like me. You don't become rich by giving talks. He'll write books. Books were in demand those days. So he thought he'll earn a lot of money and get his family out of the financial crunch that they were in. One day he could not keep up with his own lies. He jumps out of the boat and commits suicide. There's a movie called The Mercy. Colin Firth, Rachel Weisz, watch it. It's a very interesting movie. If you're not a movie kind of a person, there's a documentary called Deep Water. Watch that. It's a true account of what happened. And to be honest, we cannot blame him for what happened. We as a society put a lot of pressure on such people, and we, not me, but we are equally to blame for what happened to him. Nigel Tetley was leading the race for the fastest circumnavigation, 1,000 miles to the finish. His boat sinks. He is rescued. 3 years later, he commits suicide. Montessier, famous French sailor, is now touted to be the fastest circumnavigator and touted to win this race. He starts from some place in England, goes to the North and South Atlantic, Indian Ocean, Pacific, and he comes back to the South Atlantic. All he has to do is go up and finish the race. And at that juncture, when he knows that he could win the race, he asks himself a question: what do I get out of this? And his answer is a lot of money, a lot of fame, a lot of adulation, a lot of this is that. But the next question he asks is, do I need this? And his answer is a no. So instead of going for the finish, he sails around the world a second time, goes into the Indian Ocean and the Pacific, and then goes and stops in Tahiti, and he never comes back to France. He says that he did all that to save his soul. The only person who finished was Robin Knox Johnston. He had built his boat in India. He took it to England. It was a 32-foot ketch. He called it Suhaili. Sailed around the world in 312 days. He won the Golden Globe race of 1968. And we finally had a single-handed, non-stop circumnavigator. This race was called the Voyage for Madmen. This race has never been repeated till 2018, when it was 50 years of the original Golden Globe race. And a man called Don McIntyre from Australia decided to have the Golden Globe race once again. Now we live in a time when technology is pushing all around the world racing to prohibitively expensive levels of financing. You need at least 60 crores if you want to do a proper technology intensive round the world single-handed non-stop race. What Don McIntyre does is he takes this concept, pushes it back 50 years and says you cannot use technology that did not exist in 1968. Now think about what technology that you cannot use. No satellite internet, no satellite phones, which means no satellite weather update, no GPS, no electronic watches, no this, no that, no that, no this. In fact, if you ask him, can I? And he'll say no. And you say, I didn't even ask you, and he's like, no, you still can't use it. You have to do it in very small boats, 32 to 36 feet boats, long keel, which are very slow, and you need a lot of seamanship to, get going around the world. I built a replica of the Suhaili in India, sent it to Netherlands, finished its construction, went to Falmouth, and then from, at Falmouth, I arrive in the evening in June, one day in June. The next day, Sir Robin sails in on Suhaili. Now, my boat is called Turia, which is an exact replica of Robin's boat. He's curious, he comes inside the boat, he signs my logbook, and on the way out, he asks me a very simple question. How long do you think you're going to take to finish this race? So I tell him, sir, so Robin has done this race in 312 days, right? So I tell him, sir, 311 days. Robin is not very happy. He says, you are young and ambitious. I was not happy with that. I told him, sir, you are old and jealous. Finally, he held me by the collar and he said, I'm a captain in the Navy. I said, sorry sir, you outrank me, I'll take 313 days, don't worry about it. The next day we set off on a very short race from Falmouth to La Sable-d'Olonne in France, from where this race was supposed to start. Now, one day before that, 13th of June, thanks. I need a lot of coffee to keep myself going because my talks are so boring that I kind of fall asleep. 13th of June 1968, Sir Robin is deciding to depart on his circumnavigation race. That night he goes to a pub called the Chain Locker in Falmouth, gets drunk. On his way out, he sees a barometer and he steals it because he doesn't have a barometer in his boat. And that's the most complicated piece of technology that he's going to use for going around the earth. He steals that barometer. Fast forward 50 years, 2018, in a public ceremony, he returns that barometer to the Chain Locker. Interesting, right? 2 hours later, it's missing again. Guess whose boat it was on? Absolutely right. So I reach France, and then I'm given a very nice place to park my boat because mine is the only replica of the original race winner. And I proudly fly a huge Indian flag on the boat, and a lot of, there's thousands of visitors every day. They come and they look at the flag and they're like, which country do you belong to? They've never seen an Indian flag on a boat ever before. They're like, I'm from India. And they're like, you guys even sail in India? I felt like I was part of the Jamaican luge team taking part in the Winter Olympics in Canada. But by this time, I was like broke in many ways. It was a huge effort to build a boat in India. I thought I'd find a sponsor. I didn't find a sponsor. I built the boat out of all my, award monies that I got from the first circumnavigation, my Provident Fund, this, that, and a lot of people from Europe contributed in equipment, but I was still short of almost 3.5 crores. It was at this time that I decided to get married. I asked my wife, do you want to get married? And she says, yes, why not? So that's how strong she is. She knows that here's a guy who's like financially minus whatever, and she still agrees to marry me. We can't have a ceremony. I can't afford a ceremony, so I just go to the registrar's office and put some signatures. I have 2 witnesses. One is the manager, second is the boat builder. And when my wife sees them, she's like, are you building another boat, or are you getting married to me? Anyway, that happened, and I'm at the start with very little money, and I'm physically exhausted because I don't have money to hire a team who can help me. I start the race, I'm going really slow. I got a boat that is a 1923 design compared to other people who had boats that were at least 50 years younger in terms of design and much faster. And there was this journalist who had written about the race of 1968. He very clearly wrote in one of his articles, Abhilash's boat is definitely not a race machine. He's going to finish in 330 days, while the others are going to finish in 250 days. So he expected me to finish almost 60 or 70 days after the first entrant finished. Well, the race went off to a slow start for me. I had to cross the checkpoint in Lanzarote. I was in 10th position. And soon after that, I get a message on my satellite texting device from the race organizers who says, please call your wife. And this was a huge matter of concern because I thought if I called her, I might get disqualified. But now the race organizers are asking me to call my wife. She says, you're going to become a father. And I was like, okay, I'll call you back. I kept the phone. I thought I would discuss it with friends. And I had some flying fish and squids around me, not interested in my life. So I called her back and I asked her, what do you want me to do? Should I turn back? She said, no, you continue. I've already spoken to your parents. I've spoken to my friends, my mother. They've all agreed to help. Now this is interesting because my father came to know about my marriage through Facebook. In spite of that, he decided to help, or my parents said they will take care of it. Now I was supercharged. I was, pushing the boat as hard as I could. And along this way, my boat was named Turiya, which comes from Mandukya Upanishad. I had carried, of course, I had 100 Years of Solitude with me, one of the books that I read. I had a book called This Thing of Darkness about an admiral who surveyed Patagonia and Charles Darwin who sailed with him later. I also had a copy of Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan's Principal Upanishads. And there, sailing in the boat, I read the Mandukya Upanishad and I read about Turiya and I understand why this boat is called Turiya, because Turiya is the fourth state of consciousness. The first three states are a dream state, a wakefulness and sleep state, and the fourth state contains all this. And in a similar way, like Chaturya Avastha, everything was happening inside the boat. Right? I was sleeping, waking and dreaming, and all these things were contained inside the boat, and this was probably the most apt name anybody could find for the boat. Like I said, I was pushing the boat hard. I crossed a lot of entrants, moved up to 5th position when I rounded Cape of Good Hope in a boat that was declared to be not a performance machine. I overtook the 4th guy, and then who was Uku, and then I crossed the 3rd guy who was an Irishman called Gregor McGuckin, and I was within half a day of the guy who was sailing in 2nd position. And that's when a storm hit. It was a very nasty storm. If you draw a line dead south of India, exactly between Australia and New Zealand, that spot, dead south of Kanyakumari, that's where the storm hit. My boat capsized. I got separated from the boat. I hugged the mast so that I don't get too far away. I slipped out of the boat, I was pressed underwater, and when the boat straightened, I was on top of the mast. This was about 8-9 meters. I fell, probably between 5 to 9 meters. My back hit an aluminum pole. I fell on the deck. Then I scampered inside. Everything was a mess. Imagine you take your house and shake it really hard and then do this and that. I had charts in the bilge, I had charts stuck to the wall. My stove had fallen off and it was hanging by the hose and gas was leaking. I had a rupture in the diesel tank and there was diesel leaking, and there were tools and knives and everything spread all around. And I picked each and every item. I tried to put everything back. I was like on my haunches, on my knees, I was doing that. 30 minutes later, when I tried to stand up, my knees were not obeying me. I was just collapsing like that. I tried again. I pushed myself up and my knees couldn't take my weight. I was collapsing. I realized there's something wrong with my back. I crawled, climbed onto a bunk, secured myself there, and sent a text message. Rolled, dismasted, severe back injury, cannot get up. And that led to the biggest search and rescue of this century. There were 4 countries looking for me. I remembered those lines from Dawn. इतने सारे देशों के पुलिस उसके पीछे पड़ी है. I also remembered, words of my commanding officer who said, "Tension lene ka nahi, dene ka." Everybody was looking for me. The Indian Navy dispatched a P-8 Orion. Australians dispatched a P-8 Poseidon. Indian Navy sent a stealth frigate towards me. Australians dispatched a frigate called Ballarat. My nearest competitor, Gregor, his mast was completely destroyed. He rigged a jury rig and he sailed towards me. And all this was happening. And for 4 days, I was in the boat with no food, no water, surviving on cans of iced tea, constantly vomiting, a lot of reflux and acidity, and not able to sleep because of the hiccups and stuff like that. On the 4th day, I heard a knock on the door of the boat, and somebody asked, "Do we have permission to come inside?" I thought they were angels, or maybe I was hallucinating. That they were real humans who came, packed me onto a stretcher, transferred me to their ship, whose name was Osiris. Osiris is the Egyptian god of life, death, and afterlife. This was the last voyage of the Osiris, and they came to rescue me. They deposited me in an island called Amsterdam Island, not Amsterdam in Netherlands, but Amsterdam Island. From there, Satpura came. 6 days after my accident, Satpura arrived at Amsterdam Island. I was transferred in a helicopter. Another 10 days later, I reached India. So 16th day, they take me to a hospital, do an MRI scan, and see these fractures in my spine, and say, "You will not get up now. You're lucky that you are not paralyzed waist below. You will not get up now." I said, "Fine. It's so easy to just lie down." They booked a special plane, sent me to Delhi. 18 days after the accident, my back was cut open, titanium rods were inserted into the spine, and 5 vertebrae were fused into a single piece. And from then, I had to learn to do a lot of things all over again. I couldn't stand, I couldn't get up from the bed, I couldn't walk, I couldn't climb steps. I was taken home in a wheelchair. I reach home in a wheelchair, which was in Goa, and I see my wife who is 3 months pregnant. And I imagine I was supposed to be taking care of her. And now she has to take care of herself and nurse her husband back to health. She got onto this job with priority. In 2 months, I joined duty. 6 months later, 6 months later, I started flying again in the Navy. I'm a pilot. I started sailing, and I ordered a book on boat design, which put me in trouble because my wife saw it and is like, "Are you going to do this again?" I said, "Why not?" And she's like so angry, and I told her, "Listen, so many years ago when we met, if I had introduced myself as an IT engineer, doctor, or whatever, a chartered accountant, would you have married me?" She's like, "No." I said, "See, I need to sail to keep our marriage alive." And she's like, "Okay, granted, you do it, but this time do it properly. Find a sponsor, find the money, find a good team who can, set up a good boat and go. I have no problem." That showed the strength of, this woman in my life. Soon, 2021, I quit the Navy, get out, start looking for funds. 2022, March, 6 months to the start of the race, a UAE-based company called Bayanath, which specializes in geospatial artificial intelligence. Okay, imagine how far apart we are. Geospatial artificial intelligence company decides to sponsor me for a race where there is no technology after 1968. But they were very large-hearted. Even before I told them that I'm really short on time, even before I signed a contract, they released almost $250,000 so that I could kickstart my work. I went to France, picked up a boat, sailed her to Netherlands, and in 1.5 months, myself and another guy called Dick Coopmans, we both worked day and night to prepare the boat. And by this time, other entrants had spent almost 2 years working on their boat, and we finished our preparations in 1.5 months. I took the boat for a qualification passage of 2,000 miles, sailed in the Bay of Biscay, English Channel, North Sea, and Atlantic, came to a place called Gijón in Spain. And from Gijón, we did a small race to La Sable d'Olonne, from where the race was supposed to, the main race was supposed to start. Now, on the way, I'll tell you seriously, I hate books for this reason. I did the morning watch, and I went and took a nap. There was my manager at that time, my manager was on watch. He had only one job, to look out. To look out and tell me if there's any ship, whale, dolphin, whatever. You see something, just come and wake me up and tell me. He just had one job. And you know what he ended up doing? Exactly. He ended up reading a book. He just didn't look out. And he saw a ship finally after we hit it. It's a serious case against reading books. The bow is cracked, the mast is damaged, the forestay is broken. I somehow nursed the boat back to the Sabludalon. I'm looking for ways to repair it. Entire Europe is on a holiday. Finally, I find 1 yard in Belgium who agrees to do it. Their name is Jan van Dam. A husband and wife, a couple, they drive from the Netherlands, from Belgium. All night, they reach La Sable d'Olonne at 5 in the morning and immediately start working. Now I need to arrange funds. I am not technically qualified to make this big repair. I need to arrange funds, and most crucially, I need to buy breakfast, lunch and dinner for these guys so that they stay there and keep working. That book, which my manager was reading, cost me 50 lakhs. It's probably the most expensive book I've ever touched. Now, my sponsors were generous with money. They gave me all that I asked, but I had not catered for this, or the Ukraine war, which drove prices up, or the end of COVID, which drove prices up. So I was literally I was scraping the bottom of the barrel, and that's when I sent an SOS, and many of my friends responded. 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, 15 lakhs. One of the gentlemen was Arvind Sharma. And if at all anyone, his inflation is way off. But that's why, if at all anybody has a right to recount this story, he's one of them. He helped me at that crucial juncture without asking when I'm going to return it, without asking why I need it. He said, just give me your bank account. He transferred 10 lakhs. Vivek Shanbag, another friend of his, transferred 5 lakhs. Money flowed in, I was able to make the repairs. And not just the repairs, at this time we had to work on the green card checks, the safety checks. I had to load up food, water, medicine, supplies, everything for 9 months at sea. I had a fantastic new manager now from the United States. Her name was Sandy. Dick Coppens was there to help. My brother flew down from Australia to help, and he also made a lot of sacrifices. His wife was pregnant, she had COVID, my father had double knee surgery. He attended that, and then he flew to come and make sure that I was kicked out of LSO. As soon as we started the race, I was very tired, but still we managed to stay in top 5. We were 4th when we crossed the first checkpoint at Lanzarote. In the previous edition, I was 10th. I was 2nd when we crossed the equator, headed south. I crossed Cape Town gate. There was a gate in Cape Town, you have to cross it. And there my sponsors hired a big boat. They sailed along with me, and I got to see something unbelievable. Now, all along the North and South Atlantic, one thing that worried me was this boy who was conceived before 2018. He was 4 years old now, and my wife said she's trying to put him in school. But I had no idea if he had joined school or not. And this kept eating me. When I would meet a ship, I would call them and ask them to send a message to my wife, and check with her if my son had started going to school. My wife probably has replied to every message, but by the time the ship gets the message, I'm so far apart that the message doesn't reach me. I go into Cape Town, 10th of November. My sponsors are there in their boat. They open a laptop, do a video call, and I see my son in school, and that's his first day in school. I head south round the graveyard of ships, and now we are entering the Southern Ocean. The Southern Ocean is, as described by Francis Chichester, a sinister place. I'm not keeping a track of time, sorry. Let me know. Just do this or stuff like that, or just start clapping. So the Southern Ocean, we don't have words to describe what it is. They say that we call 40 degrees south as the roaring 40s, then comes the furious 50s and the screaming 60s. We say that at 40 south there are no rules, 50 south there are no laws, 60 south there are no gods, and at 70 south there is no common sense. I say that if you're an atheist and you go into the Southern Ocean, you would invent a god so that you can pray to someone. And the Southern Ocean claimed its first victim. Tapio, who was right ahead of me, his boat sank for no reason. We have no idea why it happened. His boat just sank. He sent out a distress, and I was the first to respond. I turned towards him, and Kirsten got the message 6 hours later. She also turned. Finally, she went and picked him. Now, I was running third in the race. We reached Hobart Gate, but before that, I had to cross that point where I had the accident. And when I crossed that, I felt physically that something was leaving me. Till that point, I felt very stressed. I was not ready to acknowledge it, but I was very stressed. My jaws were tight, shoulders were tight, my thighs used to be tight, and I had breathlessness and stuff like that. But the moment I crossed that point, I felt that there was another organism living inside me, and he had just left. We felt light. I felt light. The boat felt light. And to answer that lightness of being, the boat did 1,165 miles in 7 days, creating a race record for 7-day speed. Thanks. So yeah, the boat set a speed record. We went into Tasmania. There's a gate inside Tasmania called the Storm Bay Gate, and as I arrived at the mouth of Derwent River, winds died. Winds completely died. So close to land, no winds, you have to stay awake because there's a good chance that you might just get grounded. Huge waves, no wind, you might just get grounded. All your dreams could crash. There could be ships going in and out, and I stayed up 2 days and 2 nights. And finally, when I found some winds, I put the sails up and I just dozed off. 30 minutes later, I felt that my wife was whispering something in my ear. I don't know what she was whispering, but I clearly recollect that my wife was saying something in my ear. I realized I was hallucinating. I woke up with a start, rushed out, and I saw that my boat was heading right onto Bruny Island, a huge piece of rock. And if my boat had hit Bruny Island, it would have split Bruny Island in two, and Australians would have arrested me for changing their geography. I headed out of the gate, and as we crossed New Zealand, I overtook Kirsten Neuschafer, and I was now running second in the race. Throughout the Pacific, we ran second, but on the 26th of January, I had a nasty storm which tore my sail, destroyed my traveler, preventers parted, topping lift parted. There was like chaos and mayhem everywhere. From day it became night. I was steering the boat. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't leave the tiller and even switch on the compass. I had no idea where I was going. At the end of it, the boat was a mess. Then I headed north to make good all the repairs, and then I turned south, and I was still leading the race. On the 7th of February, which was 2 days after my birthday, I had another storm, and I call it my birthday bash, which was at the Millie Bar Club. My boat toppled twice. I have it captured on camera. If you look for it on YouTube, you will find it. You just search for my name and Knockdown, you will find it. My boat toppled twice. There was more chaos, more destruction. I sorted all those things, and I was heading south to around Cape Horn now. Cape Horn is, Cape Horn. We don't have words to describe what it is, so we just call it the Everest of the oceans. In fact, if you're around Cape Horn on a sailboat, you get two distinct privileges. The first privilege is you are allowed to keep 1 foot on the dining table. Ryan did not know about it, so he sent me an invitation for dinner today. The second privilege that you get is you are allowed to wear a gold earring on the ear that face Cape Horn when you're rounded it. And I can tell you, people have lost lives trying to earn that privilege. Now I'm going to round Cape Horn, and my self-steering gives up. The self-steering is a very rudimentary mechanical thing with a gear, a vane, and a paddle that goes in water. The paddle is a huge piece of aluminium. I had 3 spares, the third one broke. And now I was sailing in what's called a lee shore, where wind is pushing you onto land. Huge waves, 40 knot winds. The seafloor is rising from 4,000 meters to 100 meters, which means that the waves are going to become bigger and they start rolling. No lights. That's not an inhabited place. Tierra del Fuego, if you've heard, Patagonia, it's not inhabited. There are no lighthouses, there's no settlement, there is no city lights, nothing. And the race organizers, I called them and I told them that I got a problem with my self-steering. They got worried. They called the MRCC, Maritime Rescue Coordination Center, and told them that there is this boat, man alone, no GPS, no nothing, no self-steering. And they were now on high alert. They, I think, went into what's called Code Orange, which means that something might happen soon. I asked the race organizers if I could call my manager and ask her to put some technical help together and just pass this information to me. They said, of course, you can speak to your manager. You can open your GPS. You can, ask for pilotage. You can go into a port. You can stop. You can take in food, water. You can take in, repair material. You can go and stay in a hotel if you want. You can even take a massage. But you're going to Chichester class, which means you're out of the race. At the same time, these guys called my wife and told her, we think it's over for him. We think Abhilash is not going to finish this race. But I had some other plans. I removed the bathroom door, cut a piece of wood in the shape of the paddle, stuck it into the self-steering. That broke in an hour. I removed a hatch cover and stuck it in. That worked, but it was not powerful enough. And then I was looking for more solutions, and finally I found the anchor had a lot of aluminum in it. I dismantled the anchor, took out a shaft, and then I used that as a spare and stuck it onto the self-steering. And from there, I continued towards Cape Town and rounded it on Mahashivratri. I thought that was the end of my problems, and now all I had to do was deal with Kirsten, who had overtaken me. The guy was running number one, retired because of the same problem. His self-steering stopped working and he decided to retire. I thought I just had to deal with Kirsten, and in the race up the Atlantic, we were exchanging positions. Sometimes I was first, sometimes she was leading, and we kept doing this. And I come to know about this later because I have electrical blackouts. My HF stops working. I receive no weather communication, no communication in any way. I have more problems. One day, the running backstay decides to part, and that running backstay goes up to the top of the mast. That decides to part, and the same day, my mainsail trips from one end to the other end, and I climb the mast, spend almost 4 hours replacing it with my guardrail. And I replace the running backstay with the guardrail. I come down, and I replace the guardrail with the emergency HF antenna, and then I remove the entire mainsail, take it inside, I stitch it, and I put it back, working 26 hours non-stop with no food, no water, sheerly on willpower. As I cross the equator, the tins of food that I have, they rot, they rust, and they open up, and it's infested with worms. And I have to throw out nearly 50 days worth of food. I just have to throw out and clean everything with Lysol. And now I have developed a phobia of eating meat. Not eating meat for 7 days meant that I started getting vertigo, lack of vitamin B12. I started getting vertigo. I just couldn't stand or sit. Everything was spinning around me. I was still racing. And I used to shut my eye, feel my way through the boat, and I used to, pull ropes, do things. But finally, after 7 days, I decided to pick up some rusted cans of meat and I ate it. And after that, the vertigo slowly disappeared after 6 hours. Well, I continued sailing, unaware of where Kirsten was or how I was doing. And finally, I finished after 236 days at sea. So I had embassy staff who came to receive me. I had sponsors who came to receive me. And as I sail in, I see that there's a fort, on the left side of the La Salle channel. And on that fort, they had hoisted 3 Indian national flags. And trust me, I felt so proud about it. I felt very proud about it. But I was also able to do something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. You remember Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav? Everybody did 75 things. We'll have 75 boats sailing here, we'll do 75 kilometers running and this and that. I told myself, I'm going to take the Indian flag around the world. And that's what I did. The ambassador of India had gifted a national flag, a tricolor, when I started. I took it around the world, and we have an Indian flag that is, gone around the world, and that was my tribute to Azadi Ka Amrit. What did the sponsors get out of this? They've spent so much money. What did they get out of it? It was a private company when I started. During the race, they did an IPO, and whenever they met an investor, they would go and talk to them about this boat that's sponsored by them. It's called Bayanat. The boat is called Bayanat, which is named after the sponsor. It's going around the world. It's a UAE registered boat. They had the most successful IPO globally that year. I come back, and the next day, the share prices of the company goes up 30%. I don't attribute it to myself. It could be pure coincidence, but this did happen. What did I get out of the race? COVID. As soon as I came back, 2 days later, I had COVID, and thanks to COVID, I had another, a prolongation of my isolation. I didn't have to give interviews. I just had to do nothing while the rest of the world was running around to take care of my boat and things like that. Well, that's been the story so far. Did you guys contribute? Yes. Can you contribute? Yes. How? Not to me. But if somebody amongst you, your children, your friends want to go out and have an adventure, do things that you think is crazy, let them do it, support them. Why did I go back into the race after my spine was fractured? Because nobody blamed me. They hailed me as a hero even though I lost a boat, I fractured my spine. Instead of calling me irresponsible, they called me a hero. The Prime Minister was interested in my health. He phoned me to ask, how are you doing? And I blurted out to him when he called me. I had hiccups, I couldn't talk properly. I blurted out, I said that if I can walk, I'll go back to the race again. Let me finish this by not exactly quoting Toynbee, but by paraphrasing him. He says, the creative minority is made out of 10% of the society. You should allow them to lead the society. Am I a leader like that? Maybe. Because when I go out and I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about every person who tries to do something like this. When I go out and have this experience and I come back, I can give something to the society which you cannot experience in your normal life. What is it that I have given back? I found myself in a place called Mukalla, a place in Yemen where nobody goes. I just happened to be there because I was on a sailing adventure. I went about and read about the place. Many years later, when the Navy was evacuating Indians, this was one of the ports, and Navy had no idea about the lay of the land, and I could give them some information. When COVID happened, I was talking about how to deal with isolation and small tweets, and that was being picked up by various newspapers who asked me to write articles, and I kept talking about the tools that you can use to deal with isolation, which has been involuntarily imposed on these people, and I think I must have helped somebody. So it's a two-way process. I say it takes a village to send a man around the world. You can't do it by yourself. In my case, yes. I'm thankful to the doctor who operated upon me, did a fantastic job. I'm thankful to the people who rescued me. I'm thankful to the sponsors who gave me the money. I'm thankful to my wife and my parents and friends who supported me, my brother especially. I'm thankful to people like Arvind Sharma, Shanbag, who came at that moment when I really needed help. So, can a man sail around the world alone? No. It takes a village to send him around the world, and you have some contribution. Thank you so much.